sent you an invite to the stage. Tentative
I bet you
agenda.
really bad time to run some tests. Your computer's like, what?
You want to go second? Should we buy you a little time?
No, I'm good. It's just the fans are taking a while to go back down.
Gotcha. Cool. So welcome, everyone. We've got a pretty good agenda of demos lined up today. As many may be aware, we've been really focused on the foundation of our open source platform effort. So a fair number of the demos today are likely to reflect that. I have the tentative agenda posted in general. I guess I'm mostly saying that so that our presenters are aware and prepared of the order I have them in. Cool. So these are meant to be fun, forgiving, problems expected, usual disclaimer that this is about building and work in progress and is showing where we are, get early feedback and discussion and excitement around some of the stuff engineering's doing. A link to Zoom should be in stage chat. I guess I should jump in there. And with that, I will hand it off to Beard, assuming your computer has chilled out from those tests.
It has.
Cool.
All right. Share my screen. And you see my screen? Whoever's
I can
watching
indeed.
Zoom. All right, cool. All right, so most of y'all know we added Gem to the platform. So this is like continuing that effort and getting it onto mobile. So when you go to the quick actions menu down here in the nav, you'll see instead of buy, it says buy sell. You tap on that, you get an option of Gem and Banksa. When you tap into Gem, it brings up the Gem UI. And what we're doing in the background is we like load all of your accounts and we get your addresses and we pass that on to Gem. So they have your address for each of these accounts that you have enabled. So if I wanted to buy or sell, I could do that. So I'm going to do a sell, $8. Oh, no, I'm going to have to log in again. Matt, if you're there, I'm going to need a code again in a second. Oh, CAPTCHA. That's a traffic light? That's a traffic light? I think that's a traffic light. Yes. I'm not a robot. So this account's already KYC, but the KYC will all happen within the web view like it does on the desktop or the platform. Okay, so I'm gonna sell $8 of USDC. Here's an overview of my order, accept the stuff, hit make a payment, and then we're gonna auto set up a send for them with $8. Oop. Hey, this is like what you said, everything doesn't work right.
Totally expected. Somebody's got to do it.
Jim is also, I believe, having some issues right now with the market because it's like nuts. Now it's not working at all. Cool.
Well, at least it's broken for a good reason.
Yeah, so I have a
Happy
screen
all-time
recording of it
high.
actually working. So I'll just do that.
Cool.
So $8 USDC. Then you get the send. That'll pop up automatically. You can build a transaction, and then this will be the address that you're sending to, which is on Jim's side, the amount, and you can confirm and send. So that's pretty much it, since this isn't working.
Cool. When can we expect to see this in our mobile apps?
I believe we were going to try an OTA today, but I guess I should do some more testing and see how we handle the Jim stuff more gracefully than just failing.
Yeah, there you go.
So end of week, I'm hoping.
We can still OTA today because it's behind the feature flag, so we can get more testing on it while you work on the performance stuff, Beard.
That's a good point, Matt. Can you speak at all to the motivation of adding Gem and Banksa, and what does it mean longer term for fiat partners?
Yeah, so Jim is if you don't know, Jim's an aggregator, so they have multiple providers. So right now I think it's like Coinify and Wire. So with Banksa, we're kind of limited to just Banksa. So this way we can support whatever they integrate eventually, so we don't have to keep integrating different providers. It's just one entry point. And then the really cool thing is that you can buy or sell, so it's on ramp and off ramp, which will be super useful for all our users.
The other benefit with Gem is you only KYC with Gem, so you don't have to KYC with Coinify, Wire, eventually Moonpay. They're working on that integration now, so that will cut down the friction a lot. And then they have this clever system, as you saw Beard was using, where if it doesn't remember you, you just enter your email, send you a verification code, and you're off and running. Something that even banks that didn't have, so it's much smoother. I'm really excited about it.
How is their KYC process?
They were using on Fido like we were, and it's pretty smooth. One of their things is they spent the end of last year, beginning of this year, just working on making that process even smoother. So they actually have a higher people that KYC with them and then go use Wire. They have a higher KYC approval rate than people going to Wire directly because of all their friction steps they removed to be able to get people through easier. It's pretty impressive so far.
Nice. Last question from me, also soliciting questions from the audience. What are the limits, and are they different in the buy and sell directions?
Yeah, so it's going to be limited based on whether you're going through Wire or Coinify, since they have different types of limits. And I'll put in the stage chat the list from Gem on their supported currencies, daily limits, and how you can purchase and all that fun stuff. Just because the list is so long, it's basically global coverage, and then higher limits with ACH transfers than with debit cards, like usual.
Yep. Cool. Right in time to support the FOMO.
Exactly.
So I was just going to add that I'm doing the KYC process right now, and it's been more than 48 hours since they've approved, and I don't know if that's Jim's side because it's so crazy right now, but it was, to me, kind of a weird process because I wasn't sure how I was going to get back in, but it's actually, when I go in and query things, it's pretty easy. And yeah, it's not bad. Just haven't been approved yet.
Cool. Mark, you can always reach out in our support channel, and someone on our support team can reach out to Jem directly to try to speed the process up.
Yeah, I did that.
In our support?
I just did it this morning.
Oh, okay.
Cool. Anybody else on the stage have any questions on Gem? And if anyone in the audience has a question, go ahead and raise your hand and we'll bring you up here. Okay, cool. Thank you, Beard.
Yep.
Much appreciated. That's
Thank
awesome.
you.
Exciting stuff. We're gonna move on to Jam or Boots Boogie, depending on the day. Gonna talk about state management in the open source platform.
Yeah, I just shared my screen. Can you guys see that?
I can.
All right. Yeah, so we just started implementing some shared data into our Redux store. We were starting with assets so that we could not fetch some of this data as much and also get market data like pricing so we could start calculating real-time balances and all that good stuff. So we started with just getting some of the base assets in there, and we've got some more to do. But if you have the Redux dev tool installed in your browser and you go to the state tab, you can see there's been no actions fired, and there's just an empty assets object. So then whenever we actually go to the assets screen, you can see we're fetching all assets, and it's fetching assets by network right now. We could probably add a loading state based off this pending, but we haven't done that yet. And once it's fulfilled, you'll see that all of these assets have loaded inside of this assets key. Currently, we have them stored based off their token ID, and if they don't have a token ID, then they end up going off chain, but that's going to most likely change in the future. We've been talking about using a certain standard to make sure that once we have multiple chains, we never get any overlap. So that'll be coming up. So you can see this just has a bunch of asset details in each of these guys in here. One of the things that you'll notice, though, is there is no detail or description. So you'll see description has to be fetched separately. So if we go open up the Ethereum asset, we select the Ethereum asset, you'll see that it ends up fetching again, and that did not work for some reason. Nice. Oh yeah.
Can I ask why the separate fetch?
You know, I'm not 100% sure, actually. That's just how the asset service was set up. And I didn't dig into the asset service too much. It was really just taking what was there already and getting it into Redux. So I'm not 100% sure about that. You can see description is on the Ethereum asset right now. The reason that happened is because this should probably be because it didn't actually fetch, but Yeah, so then we'll update those, and then we won't have to fetch that asset data or that description for the asset again, and it can just be shared wherever we actually need it. One of the things we've been talking about, though, is just for ease of developer use, whenever we bring in market data, that we're going to update the structure of each of these assets a little bit. Most likely, instead of just having all of this detail information, we're going to have multiple keys inside of each asset, like details and market data. And the reason for that is, I'll kind of show you how some of this stuff is working. As far as like the asset slice that we're creating to create our actions and reducers for Redux, we have two, we're actually just using two async thunks. One is for fetching assets, which gets it by network. And then the other is just fetching an individual asset. And you can see this is where we fetch by the token ID, and then we fetch that subscription or that description also, and we kind of combine those together, and then our reducers handle actually setting that stuff into state. Whenever we go to actually select that state, you'll see like in this use get asset data hook, we're getting a single asset using use selector, and we're selecting from the Redux state, and we're just grabbing an asset based off of token ID or chain, just like how the keys are actually created in that assets object. And there, whenever we actually get market data in there, and market data, say, is hooked up to a WebSocket, and it's updating the price of that asset all the time, anything, if we just put market data in with all the other asset detail information, right now, anything that use get asset detail, every time the price of the asset changed and was updated, everything using this hook would re-render, because we're just selecting that single asset, and that single asset now would have data that is updating quite frequently. And there might be a reason that you might not even be using that data either. You could have just selected the asset to get the symbol and the description. So you might not even need that. So to try to actually get around that issue, but still have asset data bundled together, I figured it might be easier. We're having a discussion in one of these pull requests. But we were talking about moving in this direction a little bit more. So the current data that I was showing you in the Redux store would go under a details key, and then market data that has like this changing price and market cap would go inside of, say, a market data key. So then you could select each individual asset in a few different ways. You could select the whole asset just by the token ID, and that would change if any of the assets data changed. That would make the component re-render. If you just needed asset details like symbol or token ID or anything like that, you could just use the selector, and then actually just select the details straight off of there. So then if the price and market cap updated, the component using this would not re-render unnecessarily, since it's not using the price or the market cap. And if you wanted, even though details is just static data, which is probably never really going to change unless it gets a description, and it didn't have one before, you could just select by market data also, so that anytime market data actually updated from the WebSocket, or if you're just polling or whatever, then the component using it would actually re-render. So we're gonna start working on some of that as well, but I figured I'd just show you guys that real quick. Another
Hey,
cool.
Jam, real quick.
Yes, sir. Yep.
What do you think about not combining asset and market data at all?
Yeah,
So I was
we
chatting
definitely.
that with. Okay.
Yeah, we definitely could do that. That was just whenever I had some conversations with people, it sounded like they liked the idea of this. I did put another example of where we could also have the assets object with just the exactly what we have today, just has asset detail information in there, and then we could just have a completely separate object that does the similar thing, where it could it would just handle the market data, and then we'd basically, instead of digging down into assets, you would just, if you wanted the asset detail, you just do state.assets token ID, and if you wanted market data, you do state.market data token ID. And if we felt like, I was even just giving an example, because these selectors, you can create custom selectors that are kind of cool as well. And even if we did this, but we at some point in time wanted a component that consumed data a little bit more like this for some reason, in theory, you could create a custom selector, like select asset with market data. You could select the asset detail and the market data individually and combine them in the selector to be returned as just a single object, even. So it provides you some flexibility there as well. So if we like, I don't know if we'd ever want to do this, because somebody could just copy and paste this line when they really only needed like asset details, and then all of a sudden their component would be re-rendering because market data would be updating. So there's always
Exactly.
the fear of that. So maybe we wouldn't even want that, and we would just be like, yeah, if you want them, grab them separately. It's not that much extra code. It's 2 lines of code to get the asset and the market data.
Yep.
So
It makes
maybe
it a lot harder to accidentally re-render based on market
yeah,
data that you didn't need in the first place.
for sure. Yeah, and especially in an open source world where who knows who's going to be working on it, and they might not have like the shared knowledge that all of us have. You are probably right. It's probably better to just play it safe and select them separately.
Cool.
Yeah, I was going to show you a custom selector also that I created. There was a bunch of logic inside of the asset search for fetching all these assets and then sorting all of them. And it ended up getting cleaned up quite a bit, where this use effect had a bunch of fetching code and stuff, and now I just dispatch the fetch assets action with the network in there. Network also will be going into Redux at some point in time, so that we can we don't have to do this everywhere, because it seems a little silly. And then I used the selector, but I created this custom select and sort assets. So I was able to pull a bunch of logic out of there and actually just kind of combine it into this custom selector that can just be tested by itself a little bit more easily. And it's cool because instead of like using the selector to select the assets and then using a use effect or something, or like a use memo, and whenever the assets change, then run that hook to actually like do the sorting and stuff. I was able just to use this create selector to first select the state that I want, and then the next function is to actually do the sorting. So then anytime any of the assets, if we got extra assets or something added to that, which we most likely wouldn't because we do fetch them all right away, then the state would be returned sorted to the actual component using it. So you don't have to worry about reacting to the asset changing anymore, since it's all handled at the selector level. So it's just, I think, just a little bit of a cleaner way to handle some of that stuff and not couple some of that logic as closely to the components that is consuming that data.
Would that mean if you had the list sorted by market cap, for instance, and the price changed and pushed one asset in your list above the other, they would switch in real time?
Yeah, definitely.
Like it.
Yeah, because selecting the asset with the market data or whatever market data changed there, that would trigger the selector to actually re-render, and then it would actually go through the sorting process again. Currently, assets in the like overall asset list, it doesn't have any market data in there. I don't know if that's going to change or in the future, but I definitely think that could be, if that were the case, that could actually be, there could be an argument for doing something like this for like this asset list, where if like the market, if we were like sorting by market data also, we might actually want to combine market data with the asset data, so that we could get some stuff re-rendering or something. We'd have to play with it, but
Gotcha.
but yeah, that's all we have done with Redux so far. And yeah, there's going to be a lot more to come. So I think that's all I got.
Awesome. Do you know offhand circulating supplies? Are we getting that with the market data?
I don't know offhand. I think that does come with market data, if I remember correctly.
Yep, cool.
Yeah.
I think it belongs there because that is data that, in some cases changes pretty frequently with block rewards or whatever the emission mechanism is
sure.
with the chain.
Yeah, and we definitely don't get it in our like just like asset kind of details calls. So I'm assuming we'd be getting that through market data.
Yep. I know Beta, like the current platform, gets it from CoinCap.
Oh, cool. Yeah. but that's it. One nice thing too, I guess, just real quick about having these assets in Redux as well, is when you're testing and you have to like mock one of these, you can just click raw and then you can just copy and paste. So
Oh, that's nice.
that was nice. Yeah,
So you
you
can
still have to,
just manually manipulate the state data at runtime.
yeah, yeah, you could definitely do. I think you can update. Well, if you wanted to actually manipulate some of this data, you'd have to fire an action to change it, which I think you can do. Where is that? Oh, the dispatcher, I believe. I think you can do it with the dispatcher. Oh, it's frozen for some reason. So maybe you can't do it with the dispatcher right now.
It knows you're demoing.
Yeah. But yeah, any other questions?
Yeah, anybody up here, feel free to speak up. If you're in the audience and have a question, raise your hand. We'll bring you up. In the meantime, I'm curious what the heck a thunk is.
Yeah, so I can so the thunks inside of Redux just allow you to do asynchronous just allow you to like actually handle like asynchronous events. If you're creating just actions and reducers with create slice, like I'd say like you know, if I was just doing fetch asset inside of here, I would get state and my payload, and this can't be asynchronous. So everything ends up really being just like the action's called, you get the payload, you update state. But in this situation, to help us kind of reduce some code complexity, we use the async thunk to create like the fetch action, which allows it to be asynchronous, and then we can do like we can await these function calls before we return the data, which then is handled inside of these extra reducers, and then we can set that to state. And it's nice too because I didn't have to use it in this situation, but if you can sometimes get into situations where you're trying to like update state with multiple actions, and this does give you the ability to make sure that your state from another action is up to date before this one fires. You know, you could there's like a get state function that is, I believe it just is you pull it off one of the you can pull it off one of these guys. I don't remember exactly where it comes from, but you can get state and it'll make sure you can like actually like get state, then like fire and like log out that the like you're looking for a certain piece of state. You could like fire an asynchronous call and then call get state again, and or you could like fire this asynchronous call, dispatch an action and update state, and call get state again, and actually get the most up to date state variables, state like data that you would want. It really comes I feel like I'm probably just confusing people more, but it just can help with like very complex state management. But for the most part, hopefully we don't get into a lot of those situations. And if we do, instead of like, you know, doing this stuff, because in theory, I could have just like done this stuff right here and then just passed, and then this fetch asset would have just like taken the data that I ended up like manipulating. You know, I could have done something more like, and then maybe this would have just taken some data. So I like, and this maybe would just, this probably wouldn't be called fetched asset. So I could have just done this here, but then everywhere we want to call to fetch an asset, we would have to redo all this stuff again. So the thunk just allows, since there's all these asynchronous functions inside of it, it just basically allows us to have that inside of our action. That was probably a lot of rambling to get to that point. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, don't be sorry. I think it makes sense to me. Cool. So I don't see any hands raised. Thank you, Jam. Much appreciated. Exciting foundational stuff here.
Hey, while you're
Appreciate the efforts.
sorry, while you're maybe doing Q&A and queuing that up, I think I'm gonna exit and get another Zoom ready, and we won't have this switching Zoom thing next time. But right now we'll have to have people switch Zoom because we have a time limit on it. So I'll get the new one ready and post it, and then people can just jump to that.
Cool. Thank you, Josh. All right. So next up, we've got DeFi Cafe, who just vanished from the stage. There he is. He's going to talk about some of the types and generic typing that went in to support our chain agnostic ambitions with our server side in Unchained and chain adapters on the client side. So there's really a lot that went into this over the last week and a half, 2 weeks.
Yeah, about that. Very, very good intro. GM everybody and happy all-time highs. Just going to wait for the new Zoom link. There we go. So if anyone wants to kind of read in writing what I shared in the engineering channel a little while back, I'm just going to post a link to that message in the stage chat, which will kind of give a little bit of context to the motivation behind why we're doing all this stuff. Josh, can I get you to enable screen sharing for participants on the Zoom link, please? Josh,
Yep. Thought I did that. One participant. Oh, there we go. I see.
There we go. All right, desktop number 1. Let's go. Can everyone see that?
Yep.
Yes, sir.
Perfect. All right, so I think it's kind of important to start with the context of, before we jump into the technical details, we have to think about this from a product perspective first. So what's the vision of the new version of ShapeShift? Or, you know, the old version of ShapeShift was cross-chain, but the new version is as well. So part of building a quality and robust cross-chain product is recognizing the fact that all blockchains share some kind of common ideas, but they also have some very kind of chain specific stuff. So if you think about like an account, for example, accounts are different, but addresses are generally all just the same thing. Signing a transaction returns the same thing. Broadcasting a transaction pretty much returns the same thing. And if we're building this complicated front end that has to deal with all of these different chains kind of in the same way. You know, we want to be able to display all of your transactions across all of your chains in one dashboard. We need a way to be able to talk to the back end in kind of an ergonomic way, so to speak, while also maintaining type safety in the sense that different transactions on different chains have different data. So what we're looking at here is chain adapters. So if we kind of think from back to front, we have all these different unchained coin stacks, and they run for each individual chain. So we've got Ethereum and Bitcoin at the moment. Mike P is doing some great work, which he'll demo later on Thorchain. But we have this library called chain adapters, which is used by the front end. And what this library allows us to do is talk to these different chains as if they all kind of speak the same language. And return, like I said, the data that's common between chains, but at the same time also give us, when we want it, the chain-specific stuff. So up on the right here, I've pulled up what the work of, so Reed and I started some pretty complicated stuff, and then Kevin and Parker took it and made it much more comprehensible. So this is all committed into our lib repo. You can see the path here, but and a link to the kind of explanation and foundation behind these utility types. But basically, one of the things that that Kevin has come up with is this idea of a chain-specific type. So I'm going to show you guys roughly how that works. So like I was saying, if you think about, for an example, an account. So, all accounts have some common stuff. They have a balance, they have a public key, which is an address, they have a symbol for the chain that it's on. They have a chain as well, and a network. This is like mainnet or testnet. But then each account has some specific stuff to it that we care about. So this is where we kind of consume this utility type called chain-specific account, and we have a list of chains that we support at the moment, and this is going to expand. So we've got the Bitcoin and Ethereum chain, and you can see this sort of maps to an Ethereum account. So if we go to what an Ethereum account is, it's got all of these base fields that we had on an account, plus it's also got these other stuff. So an account has a nonce, and it also potentially has tokens. So you hold some plain ETH, and then you hold some Fox and some USDC and some sushi. So you have an array of tokens. Now these tokens are specific to Ethereum. So what this means is that, like, on the front end, when we go to consume this stuff, we're looking at the lib repo at the moment. But if we jump over to the web repo, it gives us a pretty good example of like where this comes into play. And this, this is how we send tokens. And this is a pretty good example because getting an address, for example, across chains, it just comes back as a string. We don't care, and we just have this chain adapter. We don't know what type of chain adapter it is. We just give it a wallet and say, give us an address, and we get a address that we get to send from. But when we're building a send transaction and we're trying to send the maximum amount, we have to deduct the fees from your wallet. So we then say, if we are dealing with an Ethereum chain, we grab an Ethereum chain adapter. So you can see here now, if I mouse over this, this type here is a chain adapter of chain type Ethereum. Whereas up here, before we narrow this type, this chain adapter, we don't know what type it is, but it doesn't matter because for this function call, it just gives us back a string. But when we're talking about getting fee data, this one here, we can see that it returns fee data specific to Ethereum. And this is important because, for Ethereum, we have a gas price, we have a gas limit. Those things don't exist on Bitcoin. So like if we look at the fee data for Bitcoin, for example, we don't get that type of stuff. So like we just have regular fee data for Bitcoin, which is like sats per kilobyte. And for Ethereum, we have different fields there. And this is not just for accounts, this deals with transactions as well. So we have transaction-specific stuff, like a Bitcoin might have op return data. And this is used by stuff like Thorchain for memos to figure out where the other side of a trade has got to go. But what it means is, like, ergonomically on the front end, we can, if we don't need to know what chain we're dealing with, we can call a bunch of these things. Like we can broadcast transactions, just send it a a hex string and get back a hex string of the broadcast transaction ID. But if we do need to know stuff like getting fee data, or for example here on the right, if we're trying to flatten token balances, we don't have tokens on Bitcoin, but we do on Ethereum, and we're going to have this on other chains as well. So, if we know that we have a Bitcoin chain, we can check if we have tokens, and if we do, then we can like flatten our token balance and get that. So this is pretty foundational stuff for making this both robust and easy to work with. Those were kind of the key considerations when we were coming up with how to use this stuff. We don't want it to be very verbose to use, where we have to, talk to each chain in a very different way. But at the same time, we don't want to throw away all of this type information because, like I kind of said in my text post, blockchains are difficult and unforgiving if you're dealing even with a single chain. But once you get into this realm of dealing with N chains, it's just cognitively too difficult to keep all that kind of data in your head of how you talk to Monero or Luna or Bitcoin. So we need to be able to lean on tools like the type system to ensure what we're doing is correct and be able to do it easily when we don't care about the chain. So I want to thank Mr. Nerd here. He is probably one of our most gnarly TypeScript people, and then Kevin and Parker really stepped up and took a solution that worked and made it really much more easy to comprehend and digest. So if anyone's kind of curious, this is our implementation of how this stuff is done. It's kind of borderlining on type and category theory, but in terms of how we use this stuff in web, it really becomes quite simple, and they managed to hide all of this complexity. You just get a chain adapter and you can grab basic stuff if you want, and if you need to do stuff for a specific chain, you can just say, I know this is an Ethereum chain adapter, and it gives me back the stuff we need. So that's pretty much it.
Hey, can I ask you real quick?
Yeah.
So that switch there on the left, is there a reason we don't push the get fast fee as a function on the chain adapter interface and just call get fee on whichever chain adapter you got back for the given chain, and not have the switch or awareness of chain here at all?
Yeah, we totally could do that, right? Like just have a specific implementation for an Ethereum chain adapter. We would just add that to the overall interface of get fast fee if that's something that we feel like we're doing across chain everywhere. And then in the particular one, we would just, rather than just the get fees call, we would, we've got a get fee data here. We could just have a specific one for get fast fee, and it would just return the specific stuff that we need. But at the same time, it would be, generic to that, chain that we need.
Yep. Or even just a get send max amount could maybe fill a similar need here. And then that whole max thing goes out of web, and then it doesn't have to exist in mobile or a future Electron app or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think this will just be a case by case basis as we come across these places where we're doing common things like this. We can hide that away. We've just started with the stuff that we definitely know that we're going to need for talking to a chain, account, TX history, build transactions, sign transactions. But as as we figure out the things that we don't want to repeat, we can abstract that stuff away further for sure.
Awesome.
Alrighty. I'll pass back to you, Adam.
Great. Thank you, James. DeFi Cafe. Do we have any other questions? Don't be shy. Raise hands. Come on up. Meant to be interactive.
I don't have a question, but just a comment that looking at just these last couple demos about some of this foundational stuff going in here, I'm just really impressed on the engineering thought and just the engineering application in here, right? That foundational engineering in here is really, it's impressive. Good job, everybody. And we still have to see it come to fruition. I'm aware of that, and obviously we're pushing towards that now, but it just gives me a lot of confidence.
Thanks for that, Josh. Cool. All right. Well, thanks again. That was great, DeFi. Now we're going to move on for some updates on early Thorchain integration efforts in Unchained from Mike.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Let me just get set up here and make sure I'm sharing my screen. Yeah, so I'm going to show some of the initial work that we've been doing to add Thorchain to Unchained. This will be our third chain after Bitcoin and Ethereum. And the first step towards doing that is essentially getting some API endpoints up there. So I'll show a couple of those. Namely, we've got a send endpoint, so you can broadcast transactions. And there's also an account endpoint where you can get your balance and some other account information. I don't know if you guys can hear, but my dog is kind of a little restless over there. So anyway, yeah, let's take a look at this. So this is the API running in the dev cluster. So it's at devapi.thorchain.shapeshift.com. These are the open API documents for that. Hang on one sec. All right. So yeah, let's look at the accounts endpoint here. So we've got some examples. The request to this endpoint, you just specify an address, and then what you get back is balance, account number, sequence, and then it just echoes back that address to you. So let's try that out right now. All right, so that executed, and we got back this balance. This is about 7.5 rune. Sequence number of 24. This is kind of like the Ethereum nonce, and this indicates that this account has done 24 send transactions. So the next endpoint that we have is send, which is for broadcasting transactions. This one is a little bit different. Well, the response form or the request format is a little bit different than Bitcoin and Ethereum. For Bitcoin and ETH, we just send a hex string to this endpoint. For Thorchain, the node expects an object. So here's an example of what that looks like. We've got like a memo if that exists, fee information, message type and amount that you want to send, and the destination of where you want to send that. So this is just an example, and what I would like to try is actually doing a broadcast here. So to do that, I'm going to pull up our mobile simulator, and basically what I'm going to do is like build a transaction in the simulator, and then just print it out to the terminal without broadcasting it. So let's do that real quick.
Got me excited for a minute. I think that was one of my Thorchain accounts you had in the to field back in the API.
Yeah, it is. I'm going to send you some rune right now. I've been using it for testing all morning.
Woo.
Yeah, you owe me like 3 rune. All right, cool. So we'll send Adam like half a rune here, or actually let's do 0.6. Okay.
I gotta remember what wallet that came from.
All All right, cool. So I sent that. It just gives me like a dummy transaction ID back. And then I'm going to copy this object here. Okay. And then let's click try it out on the send endpoint. I'm going to replace this request body with what we just made. Execute that and then scroll down a bit. And what we got back for the response, this is the transaction ID. And then if we check view block, we should see that transaction pop up. Sometimes it takes a minute or two before it's available in the UI. But this is the account that we just sent from. And you can see the last send here was a couple hours ago. So yeah, we'll just give that a second to show up. Any questions so far? So as I mentioned,
I got a question, Mike. You were showing that in the mobile app. So your local mobile sim is pointing at the new Unchained, or is this all being done in the old Unchained?
yeah, so the only reason I used the mobile simulator was to like build a transaction, a valid transaction that I could broadcast.
I see.
So yeah, it's just running on the legacy stuff.
I understand. Gotcha.
And so with these two endpoints, well, as I mentioned, so it's deployed to the dev cluster. I have a PR open right now that I've been working with. So basically it adds about 19 files, all ThorChain specific stuff. So once we're ready, we can merge this in, and then that will also deploy it out to the production endpoint. And at that point, from the web client, we should be able to call those two endpoints to get, like, for example, your rune balance. And then the next steps after that for ThorChain would be building out the block ingester, which is what gets new blocks from the node and parses out transactions and sends those via WebSocket to the client. And then the next step after that would be deploying a node, a ThorChain node into Unchained, because right now we're using external nodes. And then we would want to do something like add Cosmos so that we can start to generalize out the types and the API so that we can support additional. There's a bunch of other chains that are all built on the Cosmos SDK, so they all have very similar backend APIs. Some examples would be like Binance, Terra, Kava Secret, and yeah. So once we get that in there, it becomes easier to add some more of those chains. All right, so there's our new transaction. There's the 0.6 rune. Yeah, so those endpoints are ready to go. And that's it for the demo, unless you guys have additional questions.
That was great. So this differs pretty significantly from ETH and Bitcoin in that there's no block book for ThorChain, or I don't think any Cosmos SDKs. So this like our Unchained backend implementation would interact directly with Thornode and Midgard, I imagine.
Yes, yeah, it hits the nodes directly. And we actually found a Swagger spec for like basically Cosmos SDK / Gaia, which is like what they call their API service. So we found some of those, and then Sean Luther did some work to grab that and generate out the methods and types. Unfortunately, what I tried to use those, and what I found was that the ThorChain API is like slightly different. So for example, like what was the endpoint? I think it was the accounts endpoint and the balances endpoint. It basically like adds an additional layer, like an additional key value that wraps what is documented in the Cosmos SDK. So you can't like use it directly. So I had to make like some ThorChain specific types to get things working. And yeah, we could look at that. We may want to refactor that based on, depending on if what I did is going to work. And then I think what we would want to do next is, so Cosmos should be able to use that generated code directly, and then hopefully things like Binance would as well. That would be kind of the idea, so that we don't have to like create new types every time. So yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah. So I think like ThorChain has Swagger at least for Midgard. I don't know if they have one that like builds upon the Cosmos open API stuff.
Yeah. So
The other thing that can get tricky is like Cosmos SDK versions of the different chains, right? Because like we could end up with 5 Cosmos chains all on different iterations of the Cosmos SDK. That might present some challenges.
Yeah, that's definitely possible. Yep.
Cool. Yeah, this is great. It should tie in nicely with what DeFi was just going over with the generic types. The send endpoint's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
Because of the wild differences between chains with what you need to provide from the client side in terms of a signed transaction to get it broadcast.
Yeah, definitely. And here's the, I'd mentioned the Swagger specs for Cosmos. So they actually have like multiple versions up here, right? So looks like the latest is 42.6 of the SDK, but that's like super new. That's like, I don't know, like maybe a couple months old. And then we've got some others, like I want to say our legacy infrastructure, like our Cointainers and Watchtower, I think are on maybe 39.2 or 41.4. So to your point, Adam,
I think it's 4.
The other thing that they've been doing is like deprecating some of the original endpoints here, like /TXs, /bank balances. I think they're still available at this like other endpoint, Cosmos Auth v1 beta. But suffice it to say that I think the takeaway here is that their API continues to be undergoing changes. So that is going to pose a challenge, like you mentioned, Adam, for, for example, Binance, like what version of the SDK is that on? Kava, what version is that on? So hopefully they're all like intercompatible and it's not an issue, but we might see something where we need to support multiple versions.
Yep. And we should be able to like factor that complexity away from the client side, at least via our API, right? Because that can adapt it to whatever the target version is, as long as something new that the client needs to provide isn't introduced.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Yeah, that change from like Cosmos Hub 3 to 4 was pretty radical in the API, all those deprecated endpoints. I think I've seen mixed results with whether the deprecated endpoints actually function on any given chain. Some do, some don't. But that might just be version differences on the chains as well. Awesome. Have you thought about? So I know like what I was driving towards was the common like Cosmos SDK base base functionality in terms of like send receive balances, history, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Once we get into like the what sets Thorchain apart from Cosmos in terms of swapping and providing liquidity and all the extra stuff, have you given any thought to an approach to that in terms of Unchained and how we keep things from being, I don't know, unwieldy and very different?
It's not very far along. I would say like the primary goal here has been getting Thorchain specifically up and running, and then with the idea of trying to make it more general or trying to support other Cosmos SDK chains after that. Because we're definitely learning a lot through this process of just doing Thorchain. But in terms of like, so these are the types that I made. And importantly, one thing, let's see. So this is what a Thorchain transaction looks like when you get it back from the node. And it's got kind of stuff you would expect, like a block height, transaction hash. It's got some event logs. And then it has this like transaction object, which is, I don't know, I would call it pretty complex or pretty verbose. There's a lot of data in there. And specifically there's like you kind of mentioned, Adam, different types of transactions. And they call them messages actually. So for example, there's a message send, which is just sending some rune from one account to another. And then there's message deposit, which is typically indicated with a swap, where you're sending rune. You're sending rune and receiving some other asset back. And importantly, when you're like parsing out the transaction details, the structure of these two types is different, right? So you can't treat like when you're doing block ingestion or something else, you can't just treat all transactions the same. And I guess that's maybe similar to Ethereum, where you have like contract execution, more complicated transactions. So we need to handle this. Yeah, that's about as far as I've gotten.
Totally. What about like back end stuff? Like, what's the current rate if I trade Bitcoin for Ethereum and that? Like, do you think that's something that belongs in Unchained? Kevin may have opinions here too. I think I'm just raising that because we haven't really talked about it at all yet, and
Yeah,
kind of spitballing on it here.
Sure. So we do have like a Thorchain package where you could put stuff like that. Yep. So we have, for example, like you mentioned, Midgard. We do have generated API for Midgard here, which should work. Actually, we're already using it in the Ethereum block ingester. So that should have all the endpoints that you're asking about in terms of like deposit addresses and rates and stuff like that. I haven't played around with it yet, but that would be like one way to do it, is just like keep it in this package. But you're right. I guess the choice would be, or the architecture choice would be like, do we add it to that Unchained API or you do it separately? I guess we should just add it to the API, right? There would just be like additional endpoints that are needed that are chain specific.
Yeah, it would be other things like get inbound addresses and the router contract address for ETH, for example.
Right.
And there's like, yeah, there's extra security concerns around that because you want to make sure what you're getting is an actual legit vault address, pool address from Thorchain and not like a bad actor giving you his address.
Mm-hmm.
Go. Is my mic working?
Hey, there he is. Yeah, we can hear you.
Sorry, it keeps getting conflicted with Zoom. Yeah, I was gonna say that my opinion on all of this is like, Unchained is our interface to everything Node, right? So for us to like build that out and make a suitable kind of backend API for all those chain specific things, to me it feels like they would definitely fit in the Unchained API. And it's like, hey, someone would want to know about, you know, all the available pools, what the prices are at, like you said, current nodes on the network, routing addresses, etc. And that would all be useful and desirable information to add to the ThorChain Unchained API. And then these packages like ThorChain and Gaia, etc., are just nice little utility packages that can kind of bundle that and allow for leveraging shared functionality and logic across multiple coin stacks, more specifically for Gaia in this example. But it could also be useful us even publishing our ThorChain node client if, you know, you can't generate it from a Swagger, and it's like we've done the work to essentially type this stuff out and have a useful client that we're actually using ourselves and can share that as well.
Yep, awesome. Thanks for that. Thanks for jumping up on the spot.
Sure thing.
Any more questions on ThorChain and Cosmos SDK and Unchained in general? Awesome. Super exciting to see. Great that, you know, we're already moving on to another type of chain that will really open the doors to supporting many more chains in our open source effort here. Thank you much, Mike.
Sure.
Cool. Next, I'm going to hand it off to Highlander, who's going to talk to us about the Keep Key Bridge.
All right, can you guys hear me?
Indeed.
Cool. I'm gonna just post my notes up here. So I've been working on a proof of concept for the Keep Key Bridge. This is something that has been proposed and talked about over the years, and I've been wanting to get it built. I'm gonna just paste my notes in the chat for people interested. One of the reasons it came up is we have users that are having trouble with WebUSB and detecting on Windows. There's also a major lack of support for WebUSB in a lot of browser extensions. And very specifically, this is what's holding us from getting into MetaMask. And this is also going to allow multiple devices to connect to a Keep Key at the same time. So this bridge should be able to get rid of the already claimed issues that kind of plague Keep Key. So the idea is that we publish a Electron app, and the new flow for users would be they go to an app store and get an official Keep Key bridge from an app store. And then this bridge will run at startup. So the idea is every time they have their computer open, this is just running in the background waiting. So what I'm going to do is, right now I don't have a Keep Key plugged into the computer, and if I'm really quiet, you might be able to hear this. You guys hear that? So
yep.
This would be running in the background, and anytime any user plugs in a Keep Key, they'll get a sound that shows, yep, it connected. Yes, it's connected successfully. Behind the scenes, it's actually running a web server on this port, 1646 on localhost. So any website, app, any software on a computer published on any platform should be able to talk to this bridge. And this is the magic, is it's standardized because all these software know how to use just basic requests, and they don't necessarily know how to use web USB. So this is production ShapeShift. This is Axiom right now, and we have a little button underneath it. that says try the Keep Key bridge. And hopefully it is working. Yes. There's still a couple bugs.
Is that there for everyone?
Yep,
Or is
that's
that a
out there.
launch darkly thing?
No,
Awesome.
that's out there for everybody. We currently have a Python app that users can download. But my goal is to get this cleaned up, like get it through Bethany and Beard and UX, and get this published and into app stores, hopefully by the end of the month. So it's really interesting what's going on is we're sending individual data packets as post requests, and then we're sending GET requests to receive packets. So it's essentially post a packet, get a packet, send a packet, get a packet. And the bridge is just simply passing that to the Keep Key device. So I just paired a Keep Key on Axiom, and I'll go ahead and just view an address. So I got a little bit of Rune on here. And as we go step by step through things, you can see the data that comes through. So it would be kind of cool to have animations so that users can see data that are going back and forth. And my goal is to eventually replace this HTTP server with a WebSocket. And then that way you could have MetaMask and Uniswap, and all three of those things could all connect to the same WebSocket web server. And then the bridge would do all the multiplexing that would allow different apps to talk at different times. Behind the scenes, there would be some kind of locking to where we don't let apps talk to the device until the user approved it. And our goal is to have a actual prompt on the device that says, do you want Uniswap access to your device? So when you go to Uniswap and you use the whatever SDK and click Keep Key, the actual device is going to say, do you want to interact with this website? So that will really lock it down to who can talk to it and not. And it also will let you release and claim from multiple services without having to like unplug the device and like find the right tab and close that tab. Ideally, all these sites could have a persistent WebSocket connection with the bridge, and then the bridge will do all the context switching between these services and just really smooth out the UX on that. Yeah, and long term, what this is going to let us do is let users opt in. So if anybody is having issues, we can collect system information, what devices are connected. We can capture all the packets and actually put together like an error report that could get submitted to keepkey.com. So any user that has issues and they want to opt in, they could send us an anonymous collection of what operating system they're on, what KeepKey version they're on, what bootloader they're on, and we can just put together a full report for all the technicals and get those reports submitted directly to us so that we can improve the KeepKey experience. Yeah, that's all I got. Any questions?
So everything works with Keep Key through the bridge, getting pub keys obviously does because you have a balance there.
Yeah, so it is a raw transport. So everything that this website can do, it's all that's being changed is the transport. The transport used to be web USB, and now it's post and GET requests. It is raw. So ideally, long term, I would like the KeepKey client to actually be able to do things itself. Like it should be able to update firmware. It should be able to talk to the KeepKey. But because of the way the stuff is written, only one thing can talk to the KeepKey currently at a time. So if I tried to do stuff with the client, that would be screwing up its communications with Axiom. So the multiplexing stuff is not done yet. That's just what we're proposing to go forward with, is to try to address the claim device issues. Right now, it's just a dumb bridge. All it is a web server that sends just passes on the packets. So it doesn't affect any of the UX, the pin, and all that stuff. It's all just modifying the transport.
Awesome. Yeah, very cool. Questions?
Island, there's a few questions in chat about like, what if the machine's compromised, and is the encryption to the bridge, is the communication to the bridge encrypted?
Yeah, it's very important to understand that the security model of a keep key is that whatever you connect to is already having malware. That is the whole security model of hardware devices. The transport doesn't matter. Like, I hear a lot of people talking about, well, is Bluetooth less secure than blah, blah, blah. The security of a hardware device is the connection between the screen and the device itself. Ideally, we don't want other apps to talk to the keep key unless the user approves it. So that is going to be part of the process of allowing the actual on the device that says, do you want to talk to Uniswap or do you want to use ShapeShift IO? Currently, a keep key will just talk to anything on web USB. So anybody that integrates an SDK, it'll just over USB and web USB and talk to it. There's really not. It's really pretty ambiguous on that. But it's important that a keep key would never give out its pub keys until it's unlocked, and it would never sign a transaction until you actually manipulate the device.
So just to add a little bit of security context to that, the any app on your computer, malware or not, could talk to a keep key. So, adding the bridge doesn't actually, change that property. The second thing is, it is a web server, but it's bound to localhost. So the only way to open a connection to it is to use a program on the same computer. Any program that could open that connection could just as well talk to the keep key directly. So, there's, unless it's like, a website in a web browser, which is the specific case we're trying to make easier. As far as encryption goes, the data doesn't have to be encrypted in transit because it doesn't actually transit anywhere. It just goes from one process to the other. And if you can intercept that, you can intercept that, but to do so, you have to have admin privs on the system anyway. And you could just hook into the memory of either process and, dump the data, and bypass any of the encryption. So the one thing that does matter is that two different websites, like you might be using beta.shapeshift.com, for example, and it might be using the keep key bridge, and then you get a pop-up on your keep key asking you to sign a transaction, but it's actually from a different website somewhere. Because if they can both talk to your keep key, then one of them, might just sort of perform a race attack and get a transaction in when you think that when you're not expecting, when you think it's a different site that's making the transaction. That the current version of the keep key bridge doesn't have protection for that because it's a debug. It's a beta thing. It's not for general public use, advanced users only, all that stuff. You got to go to GitHub to download it and all that. The production version will use the origin header supplied by the web browser to provide the user, a prompt. Essentially, do you want this website to be able to talk to your keep key? Ideally, I'd like that prompt to be displayed on the keep key with, that would require a firmware update, but I think that's doable. And that way, you would be sure that when you're, you're not exposed to that sort of a scenario. So I understand it sounds scary, but it is actually secure. Which is cool.
And the biggest thing in my mind is, even with that race attack from another website, you get the prompt on the keep key. The private key is not leaving the device no matter what. And as long as the user looks at the information on the keep key before pressing the confirm button, any jackery with the target of the transaction or any of that is going to be right there in front of you on the device and on the website.
From a security model perspective, the only thing that web USB does that the bridge doesn't do in its current form is prompt before connecting the thing to a site. And that's what we're going to replicate, and it'll protect the user from malicious sites, trying to exploit bugs in the keep key or something like that, or do race attacks. All the rest of it is already protected by the fact that you are using a hardware wallet, and its entire point of existence is to protect you against malware in your computer. Of course, this does not help if you don't actually read the transaction before you hit the button, but there's only so much we can do for you.
Exactly.
Cool.
Awesome. This is exciting stuff, especially for unfortunate Windows users.
Hopefully long term that we can get this to be the primary way to interact with the keep key. And when this gets well polished, we can start getting a PR over to MetaMask and get support for keep key into MetaMask, because that'd be great. Anybody who's interested in helping design this app, feel free to reach out. We might even get some bounties on it. I'd love to see like some keep key animations and some animations when data is being transferred, and perhaps some kind of logo. When you pair to ShapeShift, you could show the logo of ShapeShift. If you pair to Uniswap, you could show Uniswap in the bridge. Anybody interested in that stuff, feel free to reach out.
I'd love to see it get firmware update functionality, because then we could officially retire the updater, the old crappy one, and just send everybody that goes to keepkey.com/get started or whatever to V2 client. That would be awesome. Also, it's not just for Windows people. Like, it's for anybody that uses Firefox, or anything that's not Chrome. Like, I'm on Linux, but I have to fire up Chromium in order to use our platform, because